Hi guys, I just wanted to do a tutorial just showing you how we can make kind of fabric looking fluid type dynamics in quite a simple and interesting way that doesn't involve any simulations. It's all kind of geometry nodes and modifiers. Just before I start the tutorial, I'd just like to let you guys know that I do have a collection of digital assets for you guys to use. These are absolutely free and are just meant to give you access to high quality mockups. I've got 3 different mockups and I'm going to be continuing to update these with new and interesting mockups, as well as some image assets that you guys can use as well. So yeah, this is the one we're going to be going for this tutorial, but obviously there's a lot of exploration that can be done in this. You can get something that looks a little bit like this, or something that looks a bit more like this. And yeah, I'm going to be touching on this effect in a future tutorial, so stay tuned for that. Apologies, I am a little bit ill. I have been quite ill recently, but I'm on the upcome. I'm feeling a lot better, so yeah, it should be good. But yeah, let's just move into the scene. So here's a scene, and this is kind of the outcome that we would end up with. Obviously, there's flexibility to create your own kind of visual, but yeah. So we'll just make a new scene. So we can just delete this, load factory settings. Okay, so we're in our default scene. We can just delete everything and add a plane. We can scale this by 10 on the X axis. So we're just going to go into edit mode and we're going to hit Command R, which is our loop cut tool. And we're just going to hit enter and then right click. And then down here, we're just going to add 100 subdivisions. And then here, we're just going to do the same. And we're just going to add enough to where it becomes about a square. So let's say 10 here as well. So we're going to hit A. And we're just going to subdivide this by one more time. Okay. So in our modifiers, we are going to add an array. And we're just going to turn off relative offset and hit constant offset. I'm going to get rid of this and do Y, the Z axis. I'm just going to pull it up a little bit like so. And we're going to have 8 of these. We're going to have 6 actually. We'll go for 6. Okay, so we have our array. Now we need to actually bring this into geometry nodes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make a new group input of our object, and we need to set the position of these points. So we're going to add a set position node, and we need to kind of distribute these points with a noise texture. So we're going to plug that there, and we're going to go plug it into the offset, and you see we get something kind of crazy. So this initially is probably that we need to apply the transform of that plane. So we're going to hit apply transform. That's going to give us something quite crazy. So we're just going to pull this scale down, and we're also just going to decrease all of these so we have something blank to work with. So what we can also do is just add a vector math and just subtract 0.5. And that's just going to make sure that there's no offset happening based off of just all the values being changed at the same time. So it's all kind of centered. So what we can do now is we can start to bring up that detail. We can go to 40 and we can start to bring up that detail and bring up that roughness, like so. Yeah, we just want something that looks quite fabric-y and looks like it's kind of moving through turbulence, which is essentially what this is. So I think this looks good. We can obviously add another vector math and just kind of multiply this. And it's just going to enhance that kind of deformation. So that is good for now. What we can do is we can add a modifier that's just going to help us deform this. So if we go back into layout, it's looking pretty linear at the moment, and we want this to kind of wrap around itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a simple deform here, and we're going to twist it by 270, which gives us this kind of twist, which in itself is quite interesting. In itself is quite interesting, but I think we can kind of develop this further just by duplicating it or just adding another simple deform and changing that to a bend. So we can now bend this and we can change the axes. So I quite like the Z axis. So if we just bend this on itself we're getting that kind of fluidity, and we can just tweak this until we see something that we like, you know. So yeah, I'm looking to go for this crop here. So I'm going to add a camera, and I'm going to pull that to one side like so, and then I'm just going to pull up another workspace to create the shading, and I'm just going to tell that away, pull this down, and I'm going to zoom in here and just control middle clicking and then pulling in. If I go N, view, camera to view, that's going to lock the camera so I can actually move about and you know, position this in a way that's desirable. Okay, so in our camera data, we're going to go and add depth of field. We're going to set this to 120 millimeters. And in our viewport display, we're just going to turn pass apart to 1 and just try and find a composition to start with that's interesting. I quite like this when you can see a little bit of the edge, so we're going to go for that. And we can go down here and just add depth of field so we can actually see what's happening, and we can do that for here as well, so depth of field. But we're going to go into rendered view, and we're going to be using Eevee for this. So that comes with its problems, but also its benefits. You know, it's a much quicker workflow. Rendering is much quicker, but obviously you don't get the accurate lighting. So yeah, obviously simulations, they take a long time. This thing is procedural and can be changed and manipulated in a lot more ways. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a HDRI. I'm just going to be using a studio HDRI, but obviously feel free to use whatever HDRI you'd like. Okay, so I've added my HDRI, and I'm just going to manipulate the depth of field. So I'm just going to zoom in on here and just make sure that the depth of field is something correct. So about there should do. I'm just going to right click on shade smooth, and I'm just going to turn the f-stop down just so we can get a bit more of an accurate look at what's actually going on here. So this looks pretty good, like so. Okay, so we can turn this back into rendered view, and I'm just going to add a background. So just adding a plane, RX 90, scale by 10, GY, move that back, and we're going to click new material and just add a color ramp. So we need some kind of texture coordinates for this, so we're going to go preferences, and we are going to add a node. We're going to add the node wrangler add-on. So yeah, make sure you've got that installed. Save preferences. We do Command T, which is going to bring this up. We can delete the image texture for now, and we're going to go to object settings. So you can see what's happening here. We're getting a bit more of a dynamic background, just using a gradient to enhance the light fall off. So we're just going to pull this down to something a bit lighter, and we can just rotate this to kind of get that same effect, and we can just bring this down like so. Okay, you see we're getting that nice kind of fall off of light. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be doing is adding the lighting. So I'm just going to bring them in for now, and we can kind of position them in a better way. So I'm just going to scale this up. I'm going to set this really bright, and you'll understand why in a second. But I'm just going to find a good spot for this. I think something like here might be quite nice, and then again here, like so. Just catching some of that underneath as well. So yeah, now we need to kind of mess with the color management to make this lighting a bit more contrasty in areas. So we're just going to turn it to the look to high contrast. We're just going to drop the exposure to something like -2.5. And here you see we're getting that kind of contrasty look, and you know there's a lot of fall off here. So we can just drop the darkness a little bit like so, and we can also plug this into the emission to just create a little bit more light bouncing in the background, and we can just pull this up to somewhere like that, and that should be good. So in terms of the fabric, what we can do is if we just create a new material. So I kind of want a silky look, slightly transparent, so you can really see the layering and the contours of the surfaces underneath. So transparency in Eevee is a little bit tricky to get, but it is possible. So what we're going to need to do is add a transparent BSDF, and we're just going to add a mix shader. So I'm just going to plug this here and that there, and then just plugging this into the surface. So not a lot happening right now, but if we go down to our material and add alpha hashed, we're getting this effect. So this is how you kind of make transparent materials. It's the basic kind of setup of that anyway. So if we go into our render properties, we can just start turning on our ambient occlusion, our bloom, our screen space reflections, and we can just kind of adjust these properties. I like to turn the trace precision up to about 0.75. Turn that refraction on. In our shadows, we're just going to turn our shadows all the way down to 64 pixels and high bit depth. So as you can see, the image has got a lot more kind of dynamic and, aesthetic really. So one thing we can also do to kind of improve the realism in this image is we can just add a solidify modifier underneath our deforms, and then we can also add a subdivision surface just to kind of blend that in a little bit more so it's not too harsh around the edge. I like to make this quite thin because obviously the material and transparency is quite thin itself. So I'm going to go 0.003, which is going to create this really thin material. I'm also going to reduce the roughness a little bit and also add a magic texture. Now this is basically a grid of circles which really looks like fabric. You've got that repetition of the circles. So we just need to hit Control T to give it the correct coordinates. So we're going to use our object coordinates, and this is what I mean by the kind of grid of circles. So if we just turn the scale up here, we're starting to get that fabric feel. So something like this should do. At this point we can probably hit that, so we get rid of that, so we can now lock in on our camera, and we just want to make sure the scale of this circle is appropriate to kind of the scale of the scene. So I'm going to go for something quite small, so maybe 135. That seems to be good. And to sort out the color, we can just add a color ramp, and we can just plug that in there, which is giving us this. I'm also just going to increase the roughness, which is going to enhance that fabric feel again. And yeah, this is essentially the look. We can obviously add a bump map. If we want to make this look a little bit more fabricy, we can just add a bump node, plug this into the normal, maybe drop these by, we just divide all of these by 4, and then plug this in to the height. We're just going to get a slight amount of bump on our surface, which is just going to enhance the realism really. We can obviously turn this up, it's really up to you how you want it to look. This is kind of the setup, and obviously you can work with this yourself and figure out what you like. But yeah, it's a really quick way of creating a lot of visuals. We can just change the camera angle out and move to another position, and we get a completely different look. It's quite a good setup in the sense that we have a lot of different opportunities and a lot of options for cropping and this kind of thing in something that is very stable and easy for the computer to calculate. So it's really good for actually, working with a client where you've got a lot of different options and you need to give them a lot of different options to actually find something that they like. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the video, and yeah, I'll see you guys soon.